Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
Today is Wednesday, and it means one thing. It means that it's the day that I answer your questions. Who am I? I am Darryl W. Perry. And who are you? Well, you are the listeners. And what questions do I answer? Well, I'll answer anything that you send to me using the email address ama@fppradio.com. Of course, I will also take the questions if you wind up leaving them as comments on a Facebook post, if you tag me in something on Facebook, if you respond on Twitter, because generally on like Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday during the week, I'll post a reminder, hey, don't forget the Ask Me Anything's coming up. I'll answer your questions. And then I'd solicit questions. That way you can leave a comment on one of those threads or just send the email anytime, ama@fppradio.com. So I've got a couple of interesting questions this week. The first question actually came from an email, and the question says, how does the government get the silver for these silver coins that they produce? Do they go to the market at face value? How does that work? And, this is something that I never really thought of before. And it's sad to say that I'd never thought of this before. But I did some research, and, well, it appears that in the year 2002, so just over 13 years ago, President George W. Bush signed legislation authorizing the U.S. Treasury to buy silver on the open market when the nation's silver stockpile is depleted. Now, the article that I have here does not mention how the U.S. Treasury or the U.S. Mint wound up getting a silver stockpile. My guess would be, and I can only speculate because I could not find the answer anywhere, my guess would be that they accumulated this through melting down previous silver that they had, so silver that was being used in, say, quarters and dimes before 1965. They'd say, oh, well, we've still got a bunch of silver. Any of those coins that get returned to them, I would assume they melt down. And then at one time, people could pay taxes in silver, so they probably just, accumulated stuff that way. Not to mention there's stuff that they get from various sources, such as asset forfeiture, and most likely somebody somewhere has had a collection of silver that wound up getting seized. But nonetheless, in August of 2002, Public Law 107-201 was signed into law, and the article that I have here about this comes from the Silver Institute, and they say that that law will ensure that the largest and most popular silver investment coin program in the world, the American Silver Eagle Bullion Program, will be allowed to remain and continue unfettered by disruption in the U.S. Mint's silver supply. The executive director of the Silver Institute, Paul Bestman, says, well, if the webpage that I'm on would stop jumping around, I could tell you exactly what he says. He says, this is a win-win situation for the silver industry. We're quite pleased that the U.S. government will shortly have to go to the open market to obtain its supply of silver for the American Eagle Silver Coinage Program. From the program's inception in 1986 through 2001, and the reason they say 2001 is because this article that I'm reading was written in 2002. The American Eagle Silver Bullion coinage program surpassed 100 million ounces in sales. Now, one thing that is interesting to look at is some of the numbers that they have in here. Partly because it's so old, and partly because, well, the price of silver at the time this article was written, August 6th, 2002, the price of silver was $4.35 per ounce. Today it sits at just over $14 per ounce, and within the past several years it's been as high as $40 per ounce. Now, what exactly does the U.S. government do when they need to buy silver? The article says they go to the open market, but what does the statute say? Well, the statute, and I'll post the link to it in the show notes. You can read that at your pleasure. They actually have a bunch of findings in the statute before they actually say what it is that they're going to say. It says that the Treasury shall buy on the open market, and that they will use the world average price. And they then define that by saying the average world price means the price determined by a widely recognized commodity exchange at the time the silver is obtained by the Secretary, that being the Secretary of the Treasury. But something that really intrigued me about this was the fact that they had some of these findings that let me just read some of them here. In 2001, silver was commercially produced in 12 states: Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, South Dakota, Utah, and Washington. Nevada, as of the time that they wrote this into statute, and it actually is still in the public law, which is very interesting. Nevada was the largest silver-producing state in the nation, producing over 17 million ounces of silver in 2001, which equals about 34% of all silver produced in the United States in 2000. The mining industry, it says, is also very important in Idaho, and then it gives some numbers for Idaho and Nevada. But that got me to thinking, okay, well, are these numbers still accurate? And, well, I came to find out that apparently in Colorado, the largest amount of silver that is produced from Colorado comes as a byproduct of gold mining. So that's kind of interesting because apparently the ores are fairly close to one another where they are mining them and extracting them from the ground in Colorado. So that was kind of interesting. And something else that's interesting about the statute where it says that they buy from the open market, they are only allowed, they being the U.S. Treasury and U.S. Mint, are only allowed to buy silver that was mined from natural deposits in the United States or in a U.S. territory or a possession of the United States government. So it's kind of on the open market, but not exactly because they're limiting from where they can purchase. Again, I'll post the links to this in the show notes, and then I'll jump into the next question in just a moment here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
So before I continue with the Ask Me Anything, and, well, since I was talking about buying gold and silver on the open market, I want to make sure that I tell you about somewhere that you can buy gold and silver. And people have been doing that for nearly 40 years, and that would be Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. Since 1977, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. They take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on investing and advice on buying and selling your precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. Or you can visit online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. Now, jumping into the next question that I have this week, this comes from someone on Facebook. They say, if child abuse is reported in Pennsylvania, CYS, that's Children's and Youth Services, has 24 hours to lay eyes on the child. If they are called about non-abuse, how long do they have to investigate? Do they need to lay eyes on the child? And what are the parents' rights? And this is something that is somewhat interesting to me just because of a personal incident years past involving CYS that I will not get into my personal story, but just know that, you know, like it's there in the past, but I have some, shall we say, a familiarity with CYS and the way they operate in Pennsylvania. So I was searching for this to find the answer, and, well, according to the CYS website, they actually have a thing where you can search the Pennsylvania Code and non-abuse reports received by county agencies through what is called Childline. That's where you would call and report abuse or report some form of neglect that's not necessarily abuse. And the regulation says public agencies, including county agencies, shall evaluate those referrals from Childline made under Section 6334 of the CPSL. And I'm mentioning this section specifically because I'm going to tell you what that says. The CPSL is the Child Protective Services Law, but Section 6334 of CPSL, that's basically any call made under this section of law. And then they have in parentheses, relating to the disposition of complaints received, which have not been identified as reports of suspected child abuse. If, after the evaluation, the agency has reason to suspect that that child abuse has occurred, the agency shall make a report of suspected child abuse to the Childline. So this section of statute basically says, well, in accordance with this section of law, here's what you do. If you determine after an investigation that child abuse occurred, then you follow the child abuse statutes and reporting, which would then be 24 hours to lay eyes on the child. It does not specify anywhere in this section how they conduct that investigation or evaluation. Just says that it's conducted in accordance with Section 6334 of the Child Protective Services Law. Well, what does Section 6334 of the CPSL say? Well, I happen to have that. And it says that if the complaint received does not suggest suspected child abuse, but does suggest a need for social services or other services or investigation, the department shall transmit the information to the county agency or other public agency for appropriate action. But again, it does not specify a timeline, does not necessarily specify how they go about doing whatever investigation they're doing. The next subparagraph here of Section 6334 says, upon receipt of a complaint of suspected child abuse, the department shall maintain a record of the complaint, and they shall file this under Section 6353. And let me pull that up and tell you what that says. And that, because it says point 2, let me pull this up. Immediately after receiving a report under 6351 or 6353.1, the agency shall notify the department, blah, 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 blah. And it says what information they're to have. And again, I'll post all of this in the show notes. I do see here in subparagraph C that the reports shall be completed within 60 days. That for reports that are unfounded. So my guess is things that wind up being proven have to be completed in less than 60 days, but things that are unfounded have to be completed within 60 days. And the second part of the question was, what about parental rights? And one of the first things in this statute says that nothing in this shall otherwise affect the parental rights. So basically, if you're being investigated for some form of non-abuse, you still have the parental rights over your child, but I think they're specifically asking about what sort of parental rights as far as learning about the investigation. And, well, they don't include any of that information in here. And my guess is that they don't want the parent to know what's going on with their investigation in case they might wind up finding that there's some form of abuse, and, lest the child wind up being abused when it was initially a non-abuse sort of thing. So, yeah, it's a really bad situation all around when dealing with CYS or CPS or whatever it is that it's called where you live. And again, this question was specifically about Pennsylvania. And as I mentioned, I have some experience with the Pennsylvania CPS or CYS. And yeah, it's absolutely horrible. And I would dare say is a criminal organization. But most CPS organizations actually are. There have been stories of judges that have been disbarred because it was determined that they were essentially selling children, taking them from the rightful parents and then selling them into foster care and somehow getting kickbacks. So CPS all around is a horrible, horrible entity. So that's all the questions, but I've still got news, and I've still got one more segment, so stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So at the conclusion of the show on Monday, I had mentioned something about a free Uber rally. And I encouraged people, yes, I realize at the last minute, but I did say, like, if you're anywhere in New Hampshire, show up to the free Uber rally in Portsmouth. Well, I wanted to talk about that for a moment, if I may, and since I control the microphone, then I may, and I shall. So, what's been going on over the past several months in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, is basically a turf war between Uber and the taxis, and all of the turf war is being perpetrated by the taxis. So you've got the taxi organizations, the traditional taxis, if you will, that are not happy that there's ride-sharing services that can come in and do a better job at a better price. So what did they do? They, went to the city council and told the city council, there's people that's giving people rides, and they don't have these medallions that you sold us these medallions. And you said that there's only a certain number of these medallions, and, they don't have the medallions. And they should not be able to give people rides across town like this. And so the city council said, you're right, and rideshare people, you're not allowed to do that. And so then they tried coming up with some sort of thing of, okay, well, you don't need a medallion anymore, but you do need to jump through this hoop and this hoop and this hoop. And Uber's saying, but we're not a taxi. It doesn't matter. We say you need to jump through these hoops. But we're not a taxi. It doesn't matter. You need to jump through these hoops. Well, a few weeks ago, there was a grandmother. And it's always wonderful news when a grandmother winds up getting arrested for civil disobedience, because it really shows the inhumanity of the police that they would do this to a grandmother. Now, if it was some 18-year-old kid, nobody would care at all. Well, the little punk should have just done what he was told. But in this case, it's a grandmother. Like, people have sympathy for grandmothers. People don't have sympathy for 18-year-old kids or 20-year-old kids or 20-something-year-old adult males. But people feel bad when police do horrible things to women, children, and grandmothers. And yes, I realize that grandmothers fall into the women category, but there are some women that do not wind up appearing favorable in the eyes of the media. But I'll just leave that alone and go back to talking about the grandmother. So the grandmother was stopped by two police and a K-9 unit. So it was two cruisers, not just two police officers, but two cruisers, And one of the cruisers had the dog that they always refer to as the canine unit. So the two police cars, one of which had a dog, pull this woman over at 12:30 in the morning, kick the passengers out of the car. This woman should not be giving you a ride, so therefore you must get out of her car immediately. Kicked the passengers out of the car at 12:30 in the morning, give the grandmother a $500 citation. You have to pay us $500 because you're operating an illegal taxi because you didn't jump through all of these hoops and hurdles that we say you're supposed to jump through, and so give us money. And then about a week ago, she was stopped again and cited with a $1,000 citation, or given a $1,000 fine. And, well, now the Uber and I don't think Lyft is involved in this, but the Uber organization and then some of the drivers are petitioning the Portsmouth City Council to say, hey, wait, can we work together here? And here's some proposals that we would like to see. And so the City Council this past Monday had a hearing to where they were going to, take some kind of action. And the action that was taken was, we'll refer this to a committee, and then we'll look at it in a couple of weeks. So coming up on December 7th, there's going to be another free Uber rally outside of the Portsmouth City Council, and then another City Council meeting in which hopefully maybe they will wind up doing something to reduce these regulations. Now, one thing that I thought was very, very interesting, there was one guy on the City Council. I forget the name. I think it was Thorson, Councilor Thorson. I believe I could be wrong on that name. I've got the videos up on the YouTube. I'll post a link to that playlist where you can see part of the rally. You can also see the council meeting. But this one counselor said, hey, wait a second. There are only 3 groups of people that we require these background checks of. Like, we're saying that people that want to drive for Uber need this state-funded background check. There are only 3 groups of people that we require this background check of: city employees, taxi drivers, and Uber drivers. We do not require this background check of people that drive buses. We don't require this background check for people that drive limos. We don't require this background check for people that ride the horse and buggy or operate the horse and buggies. We don't require this of the people that do like the boat tour thing, whatever it was. We don't require this background check of people that cook food. And he made the point because one of the other city councilors said, we have a duty to protect the people of Portsmouth. And his point was, well, if we've got a duty to protect these people, then shouldn't we be doing background checks of the people cooking their food? Because they have a lot more direct impact, or the potential for direct impact, on the people of this fine city and the people coming to visit this city, because they could wind up poisoning the food. But we don't make sure that chefs don't have a criminal background history. We don't make sure that chefs aren't serial killers. So why should we, do some kind of thing and only apply it to these 3 groups of people: city employees, taxi drivers, and Uber drivers, but not any other form of transportation happening in the city of Portsmouth? And he made sure to emphasize, I'm not suggesting at all that we expand it. I'm suggesting that we get rid of it. But there was another city councilor, the one that said we have a duty to protect. He was saying, well, we can't just be here and only take action when something happens. We have to preemptively make sure that nothing happens. And the only way we can preemptively make sure that nothing happens is if we charge them a bunch of money and make them jump through hoops and hurdles and get permission to be free. Basically is what he said. That's not a direct verbatim quote, but he did say that there's supposedly this duty to protect people, and I'm curious where he is finding that duty, because I have never seen anything written down anywhere that says that any government has a duty to protect. In fact, I've seen court rulings that have said that governments specifically do not have an obligation to protect anyone. Hey, this is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Don't forget to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, FPPRadio.com.